On their 5th wedding anniversary, Joshua unexpectedly got into a terrible car accident. A truck ran over his legs 9 times. His childhood sweetheart and wife, Diana, was so desperate to save him that she donated much of her own blood. She just wanted the doctors to save him. When Joshua came out of the emergency room, he was about to express how touched he was. But then he overheard a conversation between Diana and her assistant. The assistant asked Diana, "There's still time to save him. Are you really going to give up on treatment and let him become disabled?" Diana's voice was emotionless and cold. "I had someone hit him on purpose to make him disabled. I have always loved Alexander. If the Grants hadn't opposed him and threatened me, I would never have suppressed my feelings and pursued Joshua just because he was a good match. My greatest regret is not being able to give my beloved man a proper status. If I can't give him that, I at least need to give him a wedding. If Joshua finds out I'm organizing a wedding for Alexander, he'd surely cause a scene. It's better if he's housebound and unaware." The assistant sighed. "Diana, I know you love Alexander, but Joshua doesn't deserve this. He's done nothing wrong. He doesn't know you love someone else or that the child you both had was killed by you at birth. Now the kid with him is yours and Alexander's. That's already cruel enough. If he ends up paralyzed..." Diana interrupted coldly, "I don't care about his suffering. I only care about Alexander. Joshua's legs could be crushed and his child dead, but it still wouldn't amount to one of Alexander's tears." In a room just next to them, Joshua lay frozen on his hospital bed. The truth hit him like ice water, leaving him paralyzed with pain. Alexander, the once poor student financed by the Grants, was now Diana's secretary. Diana always had a reputation for fiercely defending Joshua, her childhood companion. Everyone thought she loved him deeply. Joshua never imagined their marriage was a sham. It was all a lie. She never loved him. She married him, pursued him, just to keep the Grants off Alexander's back. That accident wasn't an accident at all. She strategically paralyzed his legs to secretly arrange a wedding for Alexander. His beloved 5-year-old wasn't even his, but a child of Diana and Alexander's affair. His biological child, dead at birth. In a mix of devastation and betrayal, Joshua blacked out. When he came to, Diana sat by his side, all tenderness and concern. "Joshua, you're awake. Are you in pain? The doctor said your legs might never work again, but I'll find a way to cure you. And if not, I'll be your lifelong support." Her words clawed at his heart. He couldn't forget her earlier coldness. She had never loved him. Her love for Alexander was constant, yet she fooled him flawlessly. How could she be so deceiving? "Diana, you're an incredible actress," he muttered painfully, words sticking in his throat. Diana assumed he was simply heartbroken about his legs and quickly comforted him. "Don't worry. I'm here for you. You have nothing to fear with me by your side. All right?" She poured out sweet words, but his tears fell silently. Only when an assistant knocked with urgent business did she leave, calming Joshua to rest. But she forgot her phone. Still weeping, Joshua picked up her phone from the bedside. With trembling hands, he unlocked it, knowing she hadn't set a password due to their past trust. Truth had once seemed simple, but seeing her phone opened a world of hidden deceptions. The screensaver? A picture of her kissing Alexander. He had never seen her look so devoted, so focused, as if she were kissing the most precious thing in the world. Her private album held thousands of photos of Alexander, each one captured willingly, earnestly, labeled as the love of her life. Photos of him eating, reading, playing in the snow, walking in a white shirt under a sycamore tree. Joshua recalled how she'd gaze at her phone with unmatched tenderness. He used to joke about secrets, to which she quipped lovingly, "Of course, it's my most treasured secret." He thought she meant him and blushed, in innocence. Now he realized this was the only truth she'd told. Her love was Alexander all along. Consumed by tears, Joshua clutched his aching heart. How could Diana cherish Alexander so fiercely and yet ruin his life so completely? In his despair, he finally dialed his parents overseas. "Dad, Mom, I want to divorce Diana." Their shock came over the phone. "Joshua, What's happened? You and Diana fight? Up until now, they had been a model couple in everyone's eyes. What the hell happened? Why are you suddenly talking about divorce? Why are you crying like this? Say something. Are you trying to worry your mom and dad to death? Joshua's parents kept asking questions one after another. Even though Joshua felt like he was in complete despair, he became completely clear-headed at this moment. What Diana did to him was so cruel. If he told them, his parents might have to be rushed to the ER. He didn't want them to worry, so he hid all his pain in tears, doing his best to calm down. I'll explain everything in detail once I get to France. Mom, Dad, don't mention this phone call to anyone. Not even Diana. Once I finish the paperwork, I'll come meet you. Though his parents were anxious, they knew he was always independent-minded, so the couple didn't press further, only telling him to think it through, assuring him of their support no matter what. In the days that followed in the hospital, Diana returned to her usual tender and loving self, taking care of him attentively. Everyone could see how thoughtful she was. She'd buy treats and personally feed him. When pushing his wheelchair for walks, she'd frequently stop to make sure he wasn't cold and that his wounds weren't painful. To outsiders, Joshua seemed enviably lucky, but only Joshua knew it was all fake. Turns out, you could pretend to love someone. On the day of his discharge, she got a phone call, said there was an issue at work, and left. Joshua knew it was Alexander on the line. She only wore that gentle expression on her face when she spoke to him. The way she loved Alexander was obvious. How did I not notice it all these years? After Diana left, Joshua took a cab to the marriage registration office. He handed the pre-prepared marriage certificate to the staff. Hi, I'd like to file for a divorce. But the staff looked at his documents and shook their head with a frown. Sir, this marriage certificate is fake. If you don't want to get divorced, there's no need to bring a fake certificate as a pretense. Took a moment for Joshua to process, and then he began to laugh. He laughed until he cried. The title had never really been hers to give. Even the marriage certificate was a sham she orchestrated. Better this way, he thought, saving him the trouble of seeking a divorce. He gathered his documents and took a cab to the embassy to apply for permanent residency. Staff there informed him it would take 7 working days to process everything. 7 days, meaning for the next few days he'd have to pretend nothing was wrong, staying at home like nothing happened. When he got home, the housekeeper had just opened the door. His daughter Gloria rushed to him, red cheeks, hugging him and acting coy. Daddy, you're back. I missed you. Mommy didn't let me visit you at the hospital. I was so worried. Daddy, I'll always be with you. You'll be able to walk again. Watching Gloria, who'd been doted on by him for so many years, Joshua felt a sharp stab of pain, knowing now she wasn't his daughter. Thinking of his own child, one he'd never even seen, had been taken from him, made him tremble with anguish. Diana's own flesh and blood, yet she didn't care. She only wanted Alexander's child, so she'd ensured his own was lost. But Gloria, standing in front of him he'd raised, cherished, watched grow, gave him pause. He forced himself not to let Diana and Alexander's wrongdoing impact Gloria. After all, she's just a 5-year-old, oblivious to all this. He bent slightly to hug Gloria, tears freely falling. A few days later, Diana took him and Gloria to a cocktail party. Invitations were exclusively for the CEO of DG Group and family. Yet, Joshua noticed Alexander in the corner. Alexander, her close aide, always shadowed her at events. Joshua never doubted their ties, even buying gifts for Diana to pass to Alexander on birthdays, grateful for his care for Diana. Thinking back on his past admiration for Alexander, Joshua felt a profound sense of tragedy. As he zoned out, Diana wheeled him to Alexander. Their eyes met briefly, filled with unspoken things, yet fleeting. She entrusted Joshua to Alexander's care while she mingled with others. Once gone, Alexander remained his usual deferential self. Joshua, anything you want? I'll grab it for you. Seeing Alexander was painful, so Joshua just shook his head. Despite Joshua's simple shake of the head, Alexander looked as if wounded. He bowed and, tears in his eyes, turned away. Joshua hadn't yet grasped this behavior's purpose when Alexander stumbled, falling by a large human-shaped cake. Its sharp edges striking his head, blood flowed instantly. The guests gasped and Diana, unable to mask her feelings, rushed over. Even with her usual pretense, love couldn't be hidden. Seeing Alexander hurt, Diana showed undeniable worry. She pushed Joshua aside roughly, her tone icy. "Move!" Joshua, already in a wheelchair, couldn't withstand her shove, falling to the floor. For a moment, everyone at the party was stunned. They couldn't believe Diana, always so devoted to her husband, would be so rough with Joshua over her secretary. It wasn't until Joshua hit the ground hard that Diana snapped back to reality. She hurried over, helping Joshua back into his wheelchair. "Sorry, Joshua, I didn't mean it. I didn't see clearly just now. Secretary is hurt, so I'll take him to the hospital first. Can you go home with Gloria?" Without waiting for his answer, she quickly turned around, carrying Alexander away in a hurry. As the guests left, only his daughter Gloria stayed by Joshua's side to comfort him. "Dad, don't be sad. Mom didn't do it on purpose. Alexander is seriously hurt, that's why she was in such a rush. Can I go home with you?" He looked at Gloria at his feet, her expression sad, but he couldn't speak, so he just patted her cheek in agreement. Both of them got in the car, but halfway down the road, it was forced to a stop. Joshua was about to shield Gloria when the car door was yanked open and someone threw a sack over his head, plunging everything into darkness. He was lifted and carried away. By the time everything quieted down, he was greeted with a brutal beating. Curled up inside the sack, Joshua felt utterly hopeless. He didn't know how Gloria was doing and worried for her safety. At the same time, he wondered why he had been kidnapped. As the rain of blows continued, he finally couldn't hold on and passed out. Some time later, he drifted back into consciousness and tried to struggle. His ears suddenly caught a familiar voice. "Diana, Joshua's been beaten so badly, he's been out for hours. Even for Alexander's revenge, enough is enough. I'm afraid if this continues, Joshua's life will be in danger." Turned out Diana was behind his kidnapping. All of it to avenge Alexander's feigned fall at the party. Joshua's heart ached sharply. Before he could grieve, he heard Gloria's childish yet spiteful voice. "Not enough. He hurt my dad on purpose. I want him to wish he were dead." Then, his usually obedient and sweet Gloria raised a stick and struck it hard against his back. In the darkness, Joshua felt like he'd been struck by lightning. Eyes wide open, he let Gloria hit him over and over. He bit his lip, forcing himself not to cry out, tears streaming down his face. He realized the daughter he'd loved so dearly for years knew everything all along. Her obedience was an act. The 5-year-old he held dear, stayed up all night to soothe when she had a fever, taught to walk and talk, harbored hatred for him. With each strike, her small body put all its strength into hitting him. As though a tsunami was crashing around him, he heard nothing and once again lost consciousness. When he awoke next, he was back at the Grants. Diana and Gloria surrounded him. Their faces showed concern and guilt once they saw he'd woken up. "Joshua, you're awake. It's my fault. I shouldn't have left you alone with Gloria, letting those kidnappers take you. Don't worry, we've got them now. I'll make sure they pay 100-fold for what they did to you." Gloria, eyes red, brought a bowl of medicine over, gently offering it to him. "Dad, take your medicine. It'll help you get better. When I grow up, I'll protect you and never let you get hurt again." Joshua looked at the mother-daughter duo's convincing performance, recalling the beating he endured. His face showed no emotion, only endless sorrow and despair spreading. He said nothing. Since his legs were crippled and after learning the truth about all the deceptions, he didn't want to speak anymore. He just wanted the paperwork done quickly so he could return to his parents and recover his legs. He stayed silent, Diana not noticing anything amiss, thinking it was just his inability to walk making him sullen. She tried even harder to cheer him up. During the day, he could barely go along with their act, but at night, he constantly dreamt of the child he anticipated for 10 months, whom he never held and was killed by his own mother. He often awoke from nightmares in tears. He dreamt of his child many times, but in the dreams, the face was always blurred. True, he never saw him, so how could he know what he looked like? He didn't even know where Diana had buried the child. To show respect, he went to a temple to light a lantern for his child's afterlife. This way, the child wouldn't wander as a lonely ghost underground and could reincarnate soon. After offering the lantern, he moved behind the statue to pray. Just then, he thought he heard Diana's voice outside. In her hands was an urn, accompanied by Alexander and Gloria. They reached the door, and Alexander spoke softly. "Diana, are you really going to scatter Joshua's child's ashes just because I've been having nightmares of him seeking revenge? This is your child. You gave him up for me. His hatred is justified." Beside him, Gloria tugged his sleeve, her eyes full of affection. "Dad, you're just too kind. He's dead, yet he still clings to you. Whatever Mom does is right." Diana replied with a nod, caressing his face. "Nothing's more important than you." With that, she opened the urn coldly, looking at its contents as if it never held her own child. In the next instant, she tilted her hand and poured all the ashes straight into the sewer. Watching as the ashes in the box were emptied completely, Alexander visibly sighed with relief. Diana looked up at him and gently coaxed, "Now that its ashes are gone, can you finally get a good night's sleep?" The three of them held hands and sweetly walked out together. As their figures disappeared, Joshua couldn't hold back any longer and ran out crying. Nature couldn't have picked a worse time, as rain began to fall, wetting the ashes that blew away in the wind, slowly washing them away with the water. Joshua fell from his wheelchair, crawling on the ground, trying desperately to gather the ashes, but it was in vain. My child, my child." He watched helplessly as his child's ashes slowly disappeared under the rain, unable to do anything. His heart felt like it was about to burst. Crying, he frantically reached into the muddy sewer. He prayed to the heavens to let him keep at least something to remember his child by, just a tiny bit. Maybe the heavens took pity on him because he actually found a tiny bit of bone. Looking at the small piece of bone in his palm, his heart ached terribly. This was his child, his little treasure. He gently pressed the bone to his chest, sobbing uncontrollably. After a long while, he got up from the ground, then found someone to help turn that small piece of bone into a little pendant, wearing it around his neck. On the way home, he pushed his wheelchair through the rain, looking quite defeated. That pendant lay snugly against his chest. He stroked it, speaking as if to comfort his child and himself. Don't be afraid, we'll always be together now." When he got home, soaking wet and in a sorry state, Diana and Gloria rushed up to him, full of concern. "Joshua, where did you go? What happened to you?" Gloria rushed over with a towel. "Dad, quickly dry off, you don't want to catch a cold." Watching them fussing over him, he couldn't help but remember how they callously dumped the ashes at the temple. Diana lovingly dried his hair, fussing over him. "Joshua, since you have trouble moving around, just let me know where you want to go. Okay? No matter what I'm doing, I'll go with you. What if something happens to you?" He didn't respond, just watching their performance in the mirror in silence. Just then, Diana's phone rang. She stepped aside to take the call and returned with a changed expression. "Joshua, something urgent came up at the office. Take a good rest at home. I'll be back soon. Okay?" Not waiting for his reply, she hurried off with Gloria. What else could require them both unless it was meeting Alexander? She's used that lame excuse too many times. How had he not noticed before? It's just as well they're gone. At least he doesn't have to face their hypocrisy. Alone, Joshua was like a living ghost, eating little, drinking little, barely speaking. Mostly, he just stared at himself in the mirror and silently cried, hand over the pendant on his chest. Then came his birthday. Diana threw a lavish party for him. It was held at the fanciest hotel downtown, clearly no expense spared. Tens of thousands of roses adorned the backdrop, gifts piled everywhere, and his suit cufflinks were made of impossibly valuable diamonds. Guests marveled at the setup. Folks said, "True love is hard to find in wealthy circles, But look at how much Diana spoils Joshua. Who wouldn't be jealous? And they've known each other since they were kids, the perfect match. Some even brown-nosed right in front of Joshua. You're so lucky, Joshua. Diana loves you sincerely, truly enviable. Turning to look at them, he smiled with red eyes, a smile that never reached his eyes. Yeah, true love is precious. Those who betray it should eat 1,000 needles and have no resting place. His seriousness took everyone aback, especially Diana and Gloria, who stiffened, fearing he might know something. When it came time to blow out candles and make a wish, everyone gathered around Joshua, singing the birthday song and encouraging him to wish. Diana tenderly fixed his collar, kneeling beside him. Make a wish, Joshua. As he saw the expectant faces, he closed his eyes and made his wishes. First, I wish my leg would heal quickly. Second, I wish for joy and freedom in my life from now on. Third, I wish the people I don't want to see will disappear from my world forever. The crowd gave a thunderous applause, not noticing a thing. Only Diana and Gloria's expressions shifted, since for once, his birthday wishes weren't about them. In past years, his wishes always involved their health and Gloria's happiness. This time, his wishes were only for himself. Sensing something was wrong, Diana and Gloria quickly tried to explain. Joshua, what's wrong? Are you upset because I haven't spent enough time with you lately? There's a big project at work. I've been busy, but once it's done, I'll be by your side. Okay? Gloria chimed in. Dad, I just started kindergarten, so I've been busy with lots of homework. Please don't be upset with me and Mom. Okay? He looked at them with shimmering eyes, saying nothing. Busy? Yes, they'd been very busy, planning their wedding with Alexander. Just then, Alexander finally showed up. He handed the gift to Joshua, apologizing. Joshua, I'm sorry. I've been busy planning my wedding with my girlfriend, so I'm late today. Hope you don't mind? Joshua looked at him calmly. Alexander, when did you get a girlfriend? I've never heard about it. Alexander blushed slightly. We've been together for many years, just never made it public. His fingers tensed involuntarily on his wheelchair. Then he nodded slightly. Congratulations. When's the wedding? Alexander smiled. In a week. Before Joshua could say more, Diana interrupted. The fireworks show is about to start, Joshua. How about I take you outside to watch it? Rumor has it that couples who kiss under the midnight fireworks will stay together forever. Most of the couples at the party had already chosen their spots to watch the fireworks. But when he went out, with only a few minutes to midnight, he suddenly couldn't find Diana. He wheeled around looking for her and, sure enough, found her in the hotel garden kissing Alexander. The fireworks lit up the sky, brilliant and dazzling, making their figures starkly clear. Standing nearby was Gloria, looking up with a face full of happiness, watching them. A happy family of 3. Joshua just stood quietly in a corner, feeling like his heart had completely eroded, unable to feel pain anymore. After returning, Joshua washed up and went to bed early. Diana, having drunk quite a bit, fell asleep even quicker. In the middle of the night, her phone kept ringing. Not seeing any signs of her waking, Joshua painstakingly sat up, picked up the phone and answered. An assistant of Diana's called. Before he could speak, she hurriedly reported, Diana, something's happened. Alexander was in a car accident. I checked. It was arranged by your mother's side. They found out you and Alexander were still involved, so they targeted him. He's now. Before she could finish, Diana had somehow woken up and grabbed the phone from Joshua's hands. She listened to the voice over the phone, her face growing darker and more stormy by the second. After hanging up, she feigned calm to comfort Joshua, though she was obviously anxious. Joshua, it's late, you should sleep. I have things to handle. You rest, don't wait up for me. She didn't return that night, and Gloria was missing too. Joshua knew that with Alexander's accident, they were likely at the hospital caring for him. But he wasn't bothered. His paperwork was almost complete. He thought they'd stay at the hospital for days, but surprisingly, the mother and daughter returned that same night. They acted like nothing had happened, showering him with care. Diana offered to cook a loving dinner, and Gloria stuck close, even massaging his legs kindly. "Dad, if I massage your legs more, you'll recover better, right?" He had many doubts, but couldn't ask directly. So he casually said, "I heard Secretary Chin had a car accident. How's he doing? Is he okay?" Serving food on the table, Diana's movements stiffened hearing Alexander mentioned. "Joshua, how did you know about his accident?" "Last night, when you took that call. I overheard bits of it, just enough to know he was in an accident." Diana seemed to relax, explaining softly, "I didn't tell you initially, not to worry you. His injuries are pretty serious, multiple fractures, he'll be bedridden for a while. But no need to worry, I've had people from the company looking after him." Listening to her, an uneasy feeling gripped Joshua. He knew she loved Alexander deeply. With him so gravely injured, she should be at his side constantly, not here doting on him. After dinner, despite the soothing evening, something felt amiss. But Diana said nothing. Before bed, Diana sat beside him with a cup of honey water. "Joshua, you haven't been sleeping well. I made you some honey water to help. Drink up." He glanced at the honey water, reluctant to drink, yet Diana was insistent, gently but firmly pressing the cup to his lips. "Drink it so you can sleep well." Unable to resist, he swallowed the honey water. Not long after, a dizzy sensation overtook him, and he lost consciousness. In a deep sleep, Joshua dreamt long. In the dream, he was at a hospital, lying on a cold surgical table surrounded by doctors and nurses in white coats. He tried to speak, but his mouth wouldn't open. After a while, he finally awoke, finding himself back in his bedroom. His body ached terribly. Just as he was about to call for help, he overheard servants chatting outside the door. "Joshua isn't awake yet, right? Poor guy." "Yeah, and who knew Madam, despite always being so doting on him, would do such a thing for Alexander?" Madam ignored Lady's orders not to contact Alexander. After arranging his accident, she lashed out at Joshua. She drugged him and took him to the hospital for sterilization surgery. When Lady objected, she countered by saying she'd return any harm to Alexander 100-fold. She also said no more about taking Gloria away. He can't have any more kids. Only Alexander deserves to share a child with her. Yeah, and since he's still recovering, his wife made sure to take him home from the hospital without him noticing. She was adamant that we must not let him know. I mean, who dare tell him? It's like signing his death warrant. Joshua sat on the bed, stunned, as if hit by lightning, his whole body aching like it was about to burst. With shaking hands, he lifted his shirt and saw a scar on his abdomen, freshly stitched, the pain dull thanks to anesthesia. In that moment, his heart squeezed tight, hardly letting him breathe. Diana killed their child for Alexander, left Joshua's legs crippled, and now she went as far as to make him sterile? He had reached his breaking point. He needed answers from Diana. Struggling to get up, he stumbled from the bed and pushed his wheelchair out, crashing through the house. In his panic, he accidentally entered the room Diana never let anyone into. The moment he opened the door, he stood there in shock. Not only was her phone full of Alexander's photos, this room was packed with them too. The shelves were filled with mementos of their love, scarves Alexander knitted for her, love letters she wrote him, and keepsakes he gave her. A diary sat on the desk. The first line he read said, "Today, I'm marrying a man I don't love. I already know the rest of my life will be filled with pain." Every single word after felt like a knife piercing his heart. "Today I was with Joshua again. He kept asking for it, so I gently appeased him and gave in once more. Afterwards, I washed myself 3 times. I killed my and Joshua's child myself. He looked so much like Joshua, small, soft, and innocent. For a moment I hesitated, but Alexander cried. He said he didn't want me having children with another man, so I chose to sacrifice Joshua, watching the life fade from our child." Joshua crumbled as he read on. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. How could she love him so much? "Diana, why do you love him so much? For him, you pushed your own husband and son into hell." On the day before Diana and Alexander's wedding, Joshua finally completed his immigration process. Those days he had been like a ghost. It wasn't until the embassy called that a hint of life returned to his face. After hanging up, he booked a flight to France online. Having done all this, he started shakily packing his things. There was nothing in this home he cared for. Aside from some documents, he didn't plan to take anything. Not even the gifts from Diana and Gloria. The little trinkets Gloria made, the expensive watches Diana bought. Once cherished as treasures, he carefully kept them all. Now he realized they were just replicas of gifts given to Alexander. Even Gloria's handmade pottery was a failed experiment. He cleared out everything related to Diana and Gloria, taking it all to the backyard and setting it ablaze. As the flames rose, a part of his heart seemed to be cleansed along with it. When the fire finally died, he returned inside. He barely entered the door when he saw Diana and Gloria coming down the stairs, both dressed in gowns, looking like they'd just come from a fancy event. Seeing Joshua, their expressions changed, and they hurried over. "Joshua, where did you go? Why are all the gifts we gave you gone?" Joshua replied, "They were dusty, so I cleaned and put them away." Relieved, they assumed he still didn't know he'd been made infertile. They were a bit nervous about the missing gifts earlier. Seeing he seemed normal, Diana gently said, "We've been so busy, couldn't spend time with you. We came to see you today, but we'll be away in the coming days. Once things settle, how about a family trip?" Gloria happily hugged him. "Are you excited, Dad? I love traveling with you and Mom." Joshua's expression was still calm. He just nodded silently. They left relieved, giving him a few more instructions. What they didn't know was, as soon as they left, he silently slipped away, under the cover of night with his luggage in hand. His figure melted into the night, vanishing. Meanwhile, it was Diana's secret wedding with Alexander that was being carefully planned. As Diana stood at the top of the aisle, watching guests mingle and laugh, she felt oddly uneasy. While she'd only invited close friends who definitely wouldn't spill the beans to Joshua, her heart still raced. Thinking it was just jitters from marrying her true love, she couldn't help but call her assistant. "Check if Joshua is home and make sure he doesn't know about the wedding. He'll make a scene, understand?" After hanging up, she felt slightly calmer. As the ceremony began, Alexander, dressed in a white tux, slowly walked towards her to everyone's delight. Ahead of him was Gloria, the flower girl. Handing over the rings to Diana, she beamed at the couple. Just as Diana was about to place the ring on Alexander's finger, her phone rang, breaking the moment. Frowning slightly at her assistant's name, she picked up, only for her assistant's panicked voice to cut in. "Boss, something's wrong. He's found out everything you've done to him. When we weren't looking, he quietly left with his luggage. News just came in. A strong turbulence hit the flight he was on. The plane crashed into the sea, and no one survived." It was as if a loud buzzing sound exploded in Diana's ears, leaving her in shock. Took her a while to snap back to reality. Joshua knows everything? He knows all of it? But why didn't he confront me? Why did he choose to leave? No, it can't be. She repeatedly denied the thought in her mind. But her assistant's words kept echoing in her ears. His plane crashed, and he's missing. Seeing her confused expression, Alexander got a bit flustered. He quickly stepped forward, gently taking her hand. "Diana, are you okay? Everyone's waiting for you." He held out his hand, indicating for her to put a ring on it. Diana stared at his outstretched hand, but her mind involuntarily replayed Joshua's face. At their wedding, Joshua had eagerly extended his hand just like this. But back then, all she thought about was Alexander. And when placing the ring on Joshua's finger, she felt no joy. She picked up the ring, intending to put it on Alexander, but her hands trembled, unable to align it with his finger. After a long, tense pause, she finally put the ring down. She looked up at Alexander and said, "Alexander, Joshua's had an accident. Let's postpone the wedding." Without waiting for a response, she hurriedly left the stage. The guests were still caught up in the wedding's atmosphere. Seeing the bride walk away left them puzzled, until a close friend of Diana's stepped in to smooth things over. Alexander's eyes grew cold watching her walk away. He had waited so long, yet right at the end complications arose. He couldn't stand it. He was truly frustrated. Leaving the church, Diana felt restless. She drove straight home. Parking the car, she rushed upstairs, searching for any sign of Joshua. Just like the assistant said, there was no trace of him. His documents were gone, along with the gifts she once gave him. Recalling yesterday, she realized she sensed something was wrong, but was too distracted to think it through. She hadn't expected he really knew everything. But why? Why didn't he even confront her? Why just quietly leave? Is it to make her feel guilty? Diana couldn't make sense of it. Conflicting emotions swirled in her mind, making her head throb. She picked up her phone again, calling her assistant. Tell me clearly, what happened to Joshua? The assistant sounded like they were rushing back, wind howling through the call. Boss, I sent someone to inquire. We confirmed the plane crashed and no one survived. Plane crashes seldom have survivors. I checked, and Joshua was definitely on board. Should I call his parents to inform them? Diana didn't reply. She just hung up weakly. She never imagined Joshua would vanish from her life like this. She had always awaited this day, yet now that it happened, she felt no joy. Despite her dislike for him, she never wished for his death. She refused to believe Joshua was gone. He wouldn't just die so easily. With that thought, she called the airline asking about the crash site. She needed to see it herself. Determined, she headed towards the door to leave. Unexpectedly, just as she reached downstairs, Alexander arrived with Gloria. Seeing Alexander, her nerves spiked, making her glance anxiously at the door. Alexander, why are you here? You need to leave. It's unsafe for you here. If the old lady finds out, you're in danger. Gone was Alexander's usual humility. Holding Gloria's hand, he approached Diana. What are you afraid of, Diana? Did the call say Joshua's in trouble? Is he dead? Diana frowned, slightly irritated. It's not confirmed yet. There's no official news. Alexander smiled smugly. What are we waiting for? I saw the news. The plane hit the mountains and exploded. There's no chance anyone survived. Diana, we finally made it. With Joshua gone, I can be your husband openly. Her face darkened. She never expected such coldness from the man she loved. This isn't the time to discuss it. Let me handle Joshua's situation first. Alexander quickly understood. I get it. The Smiths and Grants were close, so his funeral should be grand. Don't worry, I'll take care of Gloria. You focus on what's important. Her expression remained steely. No need. You shouldn't be around right now. I'll arrange for someone to look after Gloria. Seeing no joy in Diana's eyes, Alexander's expression soured. Diana, what's wrong? Are you grieving for Joshua? Do you have feelings for him now? She immediately dismissed it. No, it's just, in the end, we wronged him. He did nothing wrong, and to die so young is a pity. Alexander sighed, attempting comfort. His death isn't your fault. Remember, marrying you was his choice. Just bad luck for him. All right, try not to dwell on it. You'll be busy for a while, so I won't disturb you. After saying that, he crouched down and hugged Gloria. Gloria, Daddy's going back. You stay with Mommy. When Grandpa and Grandma come, you have to put on a good show. Okay? He pinched Gloria's cheek, looking quite pleased with himself, and walked out. Once he had completely left, Gloria rushed forward and grabbed the hem of Diana's dress. Mommy, is what Alexander said true? Is Daddy really dead? Diana furrowed her brow, sighed, and asked herself the same question in her heart. Could it be that Joshua really is gone? The chances of surviving a plane crash are really slim. Maybe she should accept reality. So weird. She never had real feelings for Joshua. But now, facing the fact that he's gone, she felt such a strange sensation. It was like a huge weight was suddenly placed on her heart, making it hard to breathe. After a long silence, she finally picked up her phone and dialed Joshua's parents. The news of the plane crash had already reached France, but Joshua's parents never imagined he would be on that flight. When they got Diana's call, they nearly passed out in shock and immediately booked the next flight to a city. Seeing Diana, the couple seemed to have aged 10 years overnight. They rushed toward Diana, tears filling their eyes. How could Joshua be on that plane? Why did he suddenly decide to come to France by himself? Did you mistreat him? Diana quickly put on a look of deep sorrow, kneeling before them. Mom, Dad, I'm sorry. I didn't take good care of Joshua. We had planned to visit you together to surprise you, but something came up for me at the last minute. So we decided he'd go first and I'd follow with Gloria. I never imagined this would happen. It's all my fault. I shouldn't have let him go alone. If I had just asked him to wait, maybe everything would be different now. She spoke with such sincerity and sadness that it was hard to tell what was real and what was not. Gloria ran to her grandparents, eyes swollen like walnuts from crying. Grandpa, Grandma, they said Daddy's gone. Is that true? I don't believe it. Daddy promised we'd visit you. The couple, devastated and looking at their granddaughter, was even more heartbroken. The whole family cried together for quite some time before regaining composure. Grandma had been waiting at the old house and was truly saddened to see Joshua's parents. We didn't expect something like this to happen. Joshua was so young. Don't worry. We'll handle Joshua's affairs properly, and we'll make sure Gloria grows up well. As long as I'm here, no one will bully Gloria. Joshua's parents had known Grandma for many years, and their arranged marriage was due to this connection. Now that Joshua was gone, though filled with sorrow and anger, they couldn't take it out on her. They looked at Gloria with heavy hearts. We know your character, but Gloria is still very young, and there's a practical issue we can't ignore. With Joshua gone, Diana is still young. It's likely she'll remarry. What will happen to Gloria then? Why don't we take Gloria to France? When Diana remarries, it won't affect us. Before Grandma could respond, Diana immediately refused. No way. Mom, Dad, Joshua just passed. How could I possibly remarry so soon? Gloria is still young, and now without a father, must she lose her mother's love too? I'll ensure Gloria is well cared for, and no one will harm her. Joshua's parents scoffed, clearly displeased with her answer. You talk big now, but what about the future? They say losing a dad is like losing a mom. When you remarry and have more children, will you still care for Gloria? You either let us take Gloria to France, or you promise to never remarry. They looked to Grandma for her opinion. Grandma glanced at Diana, recalling Alexander's face. She never liked Alexander and knew his character wasn't fit for the grandson-in-law. However, her granddaughter loved him, and now that Joshua was gone, she'd likely marry him soon. If she objected, Diana might never marry again. Now seemed the perfect time to buy some time with this excuse, keeping Alexander away. In the future, when the child grows, if she wishes Diana to remarry, surely the Smiths can't stop it. With this in mind, she agreed. All right, I agree with the in-laws' proposal. I promise you, Diana will never remarry. Joshua will be her only husband. The matter was settled with just a few words. Seeing their sincerity, Joshua's parents couldn't insist on taking Gloria. After traveling all day without rest, Grandma immediately arranged for the staff to guide them to their guest rooms. After they left, Grandma called Diana to the study with a stern look. So, was Joshua's death your doing? Diana denied it immediately. It wasn't me. I'll admit to orchestrating his car accident, but I never wanted him dead. Grandma's expression grew darker. Then explained to me why he was on the plane to France alone. Realizing she couldn't hide it any longer, Diana confessed. He found out the real reason I married him. He knows I initiated the accident, and about the sterilization. Grandma's face turned pale with anger. She stood up and hit Diana hard on the back with her cane, scolding her. You! How did I end up with such a disgrace? You grew up with Joshua. How could you be so heartless? If the Smiths find out, how will our family survive in business? Diana braced herself against the blow, her brow furrowed as she coldly explained. You forced me to marry someone I don't love. I told you the only man I want is Alexander. Don't worry, the Smiths don't know the truth yet. Once Joshua's affairs are settled, and we send them off, it's over. Grandma snorted, glaring at Diana. Don't assume everything's perfect. It's best if you avoid Alexander in public. I'm telling you, as long as I'm around, he'll never set foot in this house. Diana's demeanor changed. Grandma, why can't you accept Alexander? He's kind, considerate, and patient. He stood by me for so many years. Now Joshua is gone. Do you really want me to never remarry? Grandma remained stern. I won't have you be a widow forever, but no matter who you marry, it cannot be Alexander. Remember my words. Wait and see. One day his true colors will reveal themselves. Diana couldn't grasp where her grandma's bias against Alexander came from. She'd known him for years, supported him through school, and knew his character well. How could he show any hidden side? Yet, she had to put Alexander aside for now. The most pressing issue was dealing with Joshua's situation. The next morning, Joshua's parents wanted to visit the new house Diana and Joshua shared, and perhaps take some of Joshua's belongings. Diana drove them to the seaside villa. As they entered, they saw Alexander sitting in the living room. Joshua's parents looked at Diana, puzzled. Who is he? Seeing Alexander, Diana's expression changed. She hastily approached him, giving him a look. Why are you here? Didn't I tell you that nothing is more important than my husband's matter? Tell the company and shareholders to handle it without reporting to me every day. Alexander, a bit taken aback, stood up and followed her cue. All right, Diana, I'm heading to the company now. With that, he grabbed his bag from the sofa and left quickly. After he left, Diana explained to the parents. Mom, Dad, he's my company secretary. There's a lot going on at work, and since they couldn't find me, they sent my secretary here. They didn't ask further and went upstairs to Joshua's room. She followed them up, watching as they gathered Joshua's clothes, tears streaming down their faces. Joshua, my son, how could you leave us like this? They sifted through his belongings, tears silently falling. Diana stayed out of the room, sitting in the living room by herself. A while later, Joshua's parents came downstairs. She approached them, sensing they wanted to talk. She dismissed the servants, leaving just the three of them in the living room. Joshua's father spoke with heavy emotion. Diana, Joshua's gone. I don't want to say much, but maybe you blame me for pushing you not to remarry. I hope you understand how we feel as parents. Also, Joshua loved you deeply for many years. If he saw you with someone else, it would hurt him. Diana shook her head. I understand your feelings. Even if you hadn't said anything, I would do the same. Then something struck her, and she asked, You said Joshua loved me for a long time? He liked me since we were kids? Joshua's mother nodded. Didn't you know? Before we moved abroad, you two always played together. He followed you around everywhere. In school, he always chose the same place as you. At first, we thought he admired your achievements, but then we accidentally found his writings and realized he liked you. He never said anything, though. In college, he watched you date someone else with a heavy heart. When your grandmother proposed the marriage, he gladly agreed. Being your husband was his lifelong wish. Unfortunately, he had such a hard life, enjoying so little happiness before. She trailed off, tears welling again. I heard you two got along well, so he must have passed away feeling happy. Joshua's mother's words hit Diana hard, like massive stones on her heart. She had no idea he loved her so deeply for so long. She had always seen him as a little brother. After marrying him, her heart remained with Alexander, so she only went through the motions in their interactions. Little did she know that every single one of her lies brought him joy. Diana was confused about her own feelings. Joshua's mother didn't know what he had endured, believing he left this world with love and happiness. Diana. Oh, how you've wronged a man who truly loved you. After Joshua's parents left, Diana went alone to her room with Joshua. The emptiness of it all, it made her ponder. Had she ever really considered Joshua's feelings? Over the years, was she ever genuinely concerned? In their daily lives, did she truly never care about him? If that's true, why did she fear him finding out the truth? Diana had never felt this burned out before. It was like there was a fire in her chest, without any outlet. Just then, footsteps sounded at the door. Seeing Joshua's parents leave, Alexander came back. Diana, what's wrong? Seeing Alexander, Diana quickly masked her worry and shot back. Why are you here again? Didn't I tell you this isn't the place for you? Alexander just chuckled, unbothered. and took her arm to lead her inside. "Oh, come on. I'm gonna live here eventually. Might as well get familiar with it now, right?" Diana's face turned stormy. "Who said you're going to live here?" Alexander was stunned, his smile freezing on his face. "What do you mean? Hasn't Joshua already passed away? Am I supposed to be some hidden affair? You promised me that one day I'd be your husband. Openly. I keep my promises, but you can't just show up in front of Joshua's parents like this. If they find out about you, you'll never have a chance to come into this house legitimately." Alexander's face turned sour. "Really? Are you saying you need their approval for who you marry?" Diana shook her head coldly. "Not their approval, but you trying to take over when their son's barely gone won't go over well with the Grants. Think they'd let you in then?" Alexander bit his lip, finally backing down. "All right, I get it. I won't come back until they leave the country for good. But you gotta tell me, do I have a chance?" Diana's lips tightened. "You do, but you have to wait." He pressed on, eager. "How long?" Diana's expression didn't change. "I don't know. Granny said as long as she's alive, you won't be stepping into our house." Hearing that nearly broke Alexander, but after a moment he regained control and nodded. "It's okay. I believe that one day she'll agree." After comforting her a bit more, he finally left. After the funeral, Joshua's parents didn't linger. They booked a flight back to France, and after a few hours, the plane landed smoothly. The couple wasted no time and headed straight to the best private hospital in Paris. On the hospital bed, Joshua lit up when he saw his parents. "Mom, Dad, you're back." They rushed to help him. "Lie down. Didn't the doctor say you need rest?" Joshua shook his head, smiling. "I'm much better. The doctor said there's hope for my leg. With more rehab, I might walk just fine." His parents were overjoyed. "That's great. As long as you're safe, we're happy." "Silly boy. Why didn't you tell us when you were upset? Look at you now. When we saw that girl Diana, we wanted to wring her neck ourselves." Joshua hurried to calm them. "I'm fine now, it's all over. I didn't want you worried, so I didn't tell you. I made them think I took a different flight and died, so they dropped their guard. Otherwise, with the Grants, who knows what lengths they'd go to." Joshua's father sighed. "You've been through so much. Diana dared do this to my son. I won't let her get away with it." Joshua felt warmth spreading through him and tears welled up. It felt good to be protected by family. He wasn't on his own anymore. To shake the Grants, he faked his own death, asking his parents to pretend ignorance and go to a city for his funeral. Moreover, Joshua's father demanded that they bring Gloria back to France to raise her. Gloria, after all, was Diana and Alexander's daughter, so of course, they would never agree to give her up, and Diana reluctantly agreed not to remarry. Before leaving France, Joshua's father announced this news in the paper, painting Diana as a devoted lover ready to maintain that persona at any cost. It shattered Alexander's dream of marrying into wealth. Joshua also had his mother feed Diana a tale of lifelong love for her to stir up guilt. Women, after all, often hold on to what they can't have or have lost. With all this, Alexander would struggle to be with her, and that was the plan. Meanwhile, he'd heal up in France and let Diana deal with the mess she made. And for what she and the Grants owed him, he'd make sure they paid back every bit. Back in a city without Joshua, the Grants' mansion felt especially empty. When Joshua was around, no matter how late Diana returned, there was always a light left for her. He'd set up the house warmly, with her and Gloria's favorite foods, greeting them with a smile. Now the house was just cold and silent. Diana tossed her coat aside, exhausted, and sank onto the couch. Next to her, Gloria woke and crawled over to her lap. "Mommy, I'm sleepy. Will you come to bed with me?" Diana checked her watch. It was 1 a.m. She lifted Gloria, heading upstairs. "This way past your bedtime. Didn't the nanny tell you a story?" Gloria pouted, unhappy. "Every night I have to drink the sweet soup Dad makes. The housekeeper can't make it as good. And the way they tell stories just isn't as nice as Dad's voice, so I can't fall asleep." Diana, feeling a bit helpless, asked, "Did Dad used to tell you stories every night?" Gloria nodded. "I called Alexander, but it was noisy on his end, and he said he couldn't come to tuck me in. Mom, I kinda miss Dad." Diana furrowed her brows, her emotions clearly a bit off. Your dad is Alexander. Even if he's Alexander to others, you need to remember who your real dad is. Gloria rarely saw her mom so serious, making her nervously clench her little hands. She still mumbled, but I feel like Alexander hasn't been as kind since Dad died. Before, whenever I called, he'd come immediately. Alexander said he's not allowed at our house now, so that's why he doesn't come. When can he come back? I'm really scared alone. Diana's face darkened. She didn't expect Alexander to burden their child with such thoughts. He's deliberately not coming over to push her, to make her marry him soon. She understood he'd waited for years, and now Joshua was gone. But couldn't he wait a little longer? He never used to neglect Gloria before. Has he changed, or was this who he really was all along? Diana didn't know, nor did she want to believe the man she loved for so many years could be like that. She held Gloria, gently comforting her to sleep, but inside, her mind was a mess. It was the first time she realized she had completely lost Joshua. She had imagined countless times he would leave, but now that he was gone, she felt uneasy. She remembered what Joshua's mother had said, remembered how much he'd loved her all those years, and realized she'd never truly cared for him for even a day. For Alexander, she'd done too many unforgivable things to Joshua. No matter how much she regretted, there was no going back. She'd never again have someone who loved her so deeply. What she owed him, she'd have to repay in the next life. After a month of recovery, Joshua's leg finally healed. When he walked out of the hospital, he felt lighter than ever, standing on the ground again. There were still things left undone, a person who made him suffer, lose his child, and his ability to have children. He wouldn't let that person off easily. When he shared his plans with his parents, they did not agree. They thought it was too dangerous. Joshua, now that you're safe with us, let that stuff go. I'm really scared that Diana, to be with that man, might do something cruel again if you appear in front of her. Joshua just reassured them. Mom, Dad, I get where you're coming from. But don't worry, I'm not going back as Joshua. I'm going as someone else. I'll tweak things so they won't suspect anything about my identity. I can cope with what happened to me, but what about my child? He didn't even get to see this world. I have to make them pay for that or I will never find peace. I promise safety first. Also, this time I'm not alone. Kathy agreed to come back with me. Joshua's parents sighed. You've only known Kathy for a month. She's a sweet girl, but we still worry. We understand once you've decided, it's hard to change your mind, so we'll respect your decision. But once things are done, you have to come back quickly. Okay? Joshua nodded. Don't worry, I will. In the hospital, he'd met a woman, Kathy. They hit it off and quickly became good friends. After hearing his story, Kathy, who was also planning to return home, offered to let him assume her estranged brother's identity to facilitate his revenge. Kathy's brother, Felix, ran away with his girlfriend 3 years ago and never returned. To save face, the family said he was studying abroad, so people didn't know his real whereabouts. Folks back home hadn't seen him in years and had long forgotten his face. Joshua appearing as Felix wouldn't arouse suspicion. Once their plan was set, they booked flights to City A. On the plane, Kathy looked at Joshua, who had undergone some changes in appearance, feeling a bit melancholic. Felix, you're making a lot of sacrifices for revenge. Do you regret it? Felix looked at his reflection in the window. Though there were still traces of Joshua, to others he looked like someone else. He wasn't going to regret it. The Joshua who left City A had died. The one who was hurt and bullied no longer existed. Now he was starting a new life as Felix, a brand new Felix. Whether or not things ended as he wished, he wouldn't regret it. If there was anything to regret in his life, it was marrying Diana. Flashbacks of the past came to him. He shook his head, trying to banish them from his mind, but it was pointless. Since he couldn't erase them, he decided to face them head-on. Turning to Kathy, he said, I won't regret it. I've thought through every step. Kathy, I'm really thankful you gave me this chance. Why are you willing to help me? Kathy smiled. Didn't you recognize me? Do you really think I decided to help just because we met once? Seeing him furrow his brows without a hint of recognition, she finally couldn't hold back and spoke up. Do you remember 10 years ago? You saved a young girl from a car accident. You took her to the hospital, left money for the bills, and rushed off. That girl was me. I wanted to find you afterward, but my parents decided to go abroad, and I never came back. Last time in France, I recognized you right away. I quickly fainted after the accident, but I remembered your face. I didn't expect we'd meet again, let alone that someone as kind as you would have to endure such things. So, I made up my mind to help you. Felix was surprised by this twist of fate between them. No wonder in France she approached him and asked about things back home. It all made sense now. Hearing this explanation put him more at ease. He used to wonder if her sudden kindness had some hidden agenda, but now he wasn't worried. After hours of flight, the plane finally landed smoothly. Back at this familiar place, Felix had different thoughts. Maybe it would be his last time here. Once this chapter was closed, he probably wouldn't want to return. To celebrate Kathy's return, the FG group threw a lavish party. They invited people from all sectors, including Diana. As Kathy's brother, he was picked to open the dance at the party. Felix has quite a reputation. They say he's a great pianist and a renowned designer. With him back, everyone at the party was curious and excited to see him. People couldn't help but gossip. I heard Felix is the stepson, but they raised him like he's their own, investing only the best in him. Is he back looking for a partner? Maybe why else would he be home now? The Greens are thriving in the French business world. If someone marries Felix and ties up with FG Group, they'll be set for international business. Exactly. That's why there are so many young women here tonight. Diana wasn't interested in any of this chatter. She just quietly sipped her drink. Her grandmother asked her to attend, so she planned to make a short appearance. As the drinks flowed and the gossip buzzed, she felt bored. Just as she intended to leave, music started playing, and all eyes turned to the stage. Felix stepped out with Kathy, hand in hand, into the spotlight. Silence fell as the handsome, charming man made his way to the center. Kathy greeted everyone first. Welcome everyone to our celebration. This is my brother, Felix. He'll start us off with a dance. Enjoy the evening. As she stepped aside, the light shone solely on Felix. In the crowd, Diana was frozen, startled by the sight of him. He looked so much like Joshua. For once, she was caught off guard. Felix began to dance as the music flowed, with each move elegant and precise. Years of practice were evident. He commanded everyone's gaze, capturing their attention. No, it can't be, she whispered. Suddenly, her glass slipped from her grasp and shattered, spilling wine all over. Panicking, she wiped it with a handkerchief and looked back at the dancing figure. Joshua couldn't dance, and his legs were damaged. Yet, here was someone with a striking resemblance. She pushed through the crowd and reached him, grabbing his hand. Joshua, is it really you? You're alive? Felix was startled by Diana interrupting his dance, looking puzzled. Who are you? She tightened her grip, disbelieving. You don't know me? You must be lying, Joshua. Kathy came over to defuse the situation. Diana, do you know Felix? Someone who knew Joshua explained. Kathy, your brother resembles Diana's late husband. Diana must be mistaken, still grieving. Other voices chimed in, it's a common mistake. Felix and Joshua do look quite similar, though Felix grew up abroad and is an excellent dancer, unlike Joshua. Right, Diana? Realizing her mistake, Diana loosened her grip and apologized. Sorry, I mistook you for someone else. Felix rubbed his wrist, smiling softly. No worries. To be missed and loved like that must mean he was truly cherished. Seeing her reaction, he felt nauseous but wanted to see her act. A bystander filled in, oh yes, Diana and her husband were famously devoted. Even after his accident, she took great care of him. Everyone says marrying a woman like Diana is a blessing. Internally, Felix scoffed, thinking, sure, such devotion, to cripple him, sterilize him, and kill his child for her so-called love. A wife like that is a blessing. If someone else had her, it must have been good karma from a past life. Diana paused for a second, didn't respond to him directly, then changed the topic. Felix dances really well. He must have practiced a lot over the years, right? Felix nodded with a smile. Do you know how to dance, Diana? Diana faintly smiled. Not really. Felix's smile grew even bigger. Diana, you're being modest. I'm quite fond of soulful women. Hearing you and your husband's story intrigues me. Would you mind sharing it? Diana glanced around at the crowd and then replied, If Felix is willing, we can sit in the garden for a bit. Felix gestured forward. I'd love to hear it. The two of them carried their wine glasses and headed to the garden, away from the crowd. In the peaceful setting, it was easier to open up. Diana looked at him and felt a strange familiarity, making her want to share more. You do look a lot like my husband, Diana said. Felix nodded. I gathered as much from the guests' comments earlier. How did you and your husband meet? Diana was lost in thought. We grew up together. Childhood sweethearts. Later, our families wanted an alliance, so we got married and had kids. Felix looked envious. That's so sweet. Who wouldn't envy a love like that? You have a child, right? How old and cute must they be? For the first time, Diana found herself explaining patiently to a man with many questions, without any annoyance. We have a daughter. She's already 5. You seem to like kids a lot. He nodded enthusiastically. I do. Even though I'm busy with design and art exhibits now, my ideal life is raising a happy family. So I really envy your husband. By the way, can I ask how he passed away? Talking about Joshua's death made her face darken slightly, but she answered patiently. Plane crash. Upon hearing this, Felix immediately looked regretful. That's truly unfortunate. But I'm sure your husband was happy when he was with you. So even though he's gone, he'd want you to move on and start a new life. Diana's face remained grave. After a long pause, she said, I feel I let him down. If I could go back, I'd make things right. Felix stood up to comfort her, giving her shoulder a gentle tap, embodying the perfect listener. They had a nice conversation until the party ended, and guests started leaving. When Kathy came looking, they waved goodbye. Just before parting, Diana asked, Felix, is it okay if we meet up again sometime? Felix nodded with a smile. Of course. I'm glad to have met you, Diana. Since we're friends, please call me Felix, just like Kathy does. Diana's earlier sadness vanished instantly. Then you should call me Diana, too. They shared a smile and said, deal. Returning from the party, Diana felt happier than she had in a long time since Joshua's death. By the time she got back to the Grants, it was late, yet the living room lights were still on. She thought Gloria hadn't gone to bed, but it turned out to be Alexander. Seeing her, Alexander's face was stormy. Diana, where have you been? Why were you back so late? Diana laid on the couch, exhausted. Just some business. Got back late. Why are you here? Her tone wasn't kind, which only made Alexander more upset. Why can't I come? Gloria called me. She can't sleep alone, and here I am, and you give me attitude? Alexander leaned in, sniffing to find a foreign perfume smell, which changed his expression immediately. What's this? Were you drinking with another man today? Annoyed by his accusations, Diana snapped. She pushed his hand away and said, naturally, there were men at the party. Someone wore cologne that stuck to me. Quit making a fuss. Alexander erupted in anger. You think I'm being unreasonable? Who'd I do this for? Are you seeing someone else? Tell me. Half mad, he tried grabbing her phone to check, but Diana was too proud to let him. She pushed him to the floor, her voice full of disdain. Enough, Alexander. You weren't like this before. What happened to you? But Alexander wasn't listening. In his fury, he ran upstairs, dragging a sleepy Gloria down. Let's go. You're coming with me. She doesn't want either of us now. From now on, we'll be on our own. Gloria, drowsy and barely dressed, was being dragged and bumped her head, crying out, I don't want to go. I want to stay with Mom. Uncle, I want to sleep. Hearing Gloria call him Uncle fueled Alexander's anger. Stop crying. Uncle? I'm your dad. She doesn't want you, why stay? Let's go. As she watched him drag her, all of Diana's patience was used up. She blocked Alexander, her gaze now cold. Put Gloria down. It's the middle of the night. What are you doing? Alexander's face was pale with anger, while he clung to Gloria, who was crying. Gloria is my daughter. If I want to take her somewhere, I'll take her. You won't let me in, but I can't take my own daughter? He finished speaking and pulled at Gloria's hand, trying to forcefully take her away. Gloria cried even harder. Unable to break free, she bit Alexander's arm. In pain, Alexander let go, and Gloria instantly ran to hide behind Diana. Mom, I don't want Alexander. I want Dad back. Hearing her say that, Alexander got furious and couldn't help but curse. You little brat. I'm your dad. Your other dad is long gone and isn't coming back. Diana finally couldn't help but step in, gripping his arm, and coldly scolded. Enough. She's just a child. She doesn't know any better. When Joshua was around, he never scared her like this without caring for her safety. You better leave now, stop causing trouble, or don't blame me for turning against you. Alexander was both angry and hurt, but looking at Diana's face, he realized she was seriously mad and didn't dare say more. He just left the Grants, crying. Watching Alexander leave, Gloria rushed into Diana's arms, crying non-stop. Mom, why did Alexander get so mean? I'm scared. I miss Dad. Diana's heart was full of mixed emotions. At this point, she could only softly pat her back, continually comforting her. She didn't understand where the gentle and kind Alexander had gone, or how he had become like this. She remembered everything the old lady said, and wondered if she had really judged him wrongly. A few days later, busy with work, she didn't reach out to Alexander. During her free moments, she couldn't help but glance at Felix's number on her phone. After much hesitation, she finally called him. The phone was answered quickly, and the voice on the other end was cheerful and clear. Diana, what made you call me? Is there something? Hearing his familiar voice, Diana felt oddly relaxed. She smiled and said, I want to invite you to dinner. Would you like to join me? Felix thought briefly and then replied, I have an art exhibit in the afternoon. Should be done by a reasonable time. What time do you want to meet? Diana checked her schedule and replied, How about 8 p.m. at the restaurant? He replied smoothly, Sounds good. His answer instantly brightened Diana's mood. Her heavy afternoon meetings didn't bother her anymore, and she surprisingly looked forward to dinner. At the restaurant, Felix was already there early. Used to him being late, Diana found herself liking him even more. As they ordered, they surprisingly shared the same taste in food. A smile appeared on Diana's face, and Felix chuckled inwardly. They'd been married for so long. He knew her likes by heart. Impressing her was too easy. As they enjoyed dinner, Diana grew more curious about Felix, asking all sorts of questions, trying to learn about his past. You grew up abroad, so your French must be great. People say your designs are well known. Can I see some sometime? How long are you staying back this time? Felix remained warm and patient as he answered her questions. Even though I was in France, English is my first language. I often spoke Chinese too. I have 2 more exhibitions here, and you're welcome to come by. I haven't decided on how long I'll stay. After the exhibitions, I'd like to relax a bit. Hearing that, she seemed relieved. Mid-dinner, Felix got up to use the restroom. Just when he entered, he saw a familiar face at the door. Their eyes met, and Alexander stepped back, startled, then forced himself to act tough. Are you a ghost or something? Felix smiled as if he didn't recognize him. That's quite funny, of course. I'm human. You must be confusing me with some Joshua guy again. I'm really curious how much I resemble him. Nice to meet you. I'm Felix from FG Group. And you are? Upon hearing his introduction, Alexander hid his fear, responding coldly, Since you asked, I'll tell you. I'm Diana's man, the father of her kids. So now you know, right? Felix blinked, looking confused. Aren't Diana's kids Joshua's? I don't quite get it. Alexander's face darkened. I don't care about your nonsense. I'm telling you not to come between Diana and me. Okay? You're the third party here. Felix's expression turned more puzzled. The more you talk, the less I understand. I heard Diana's husband passed recently, and now you're declaring your place? So aren't you the third party here? His words ignited Alexander's anger. As he lashed out, Felix had anticipated and dodged the swing. But as if in a frenzy, Alexander grabbed Felix's hair, shouting insults. Their commotion attracted Diana from afar. Seeing her approach, Felix fell purposely, hitting the counter with a loud thump. With that noise, Diana appeared, seeing Felix on the ground looking vulnerable and Alexander looking beastly. Right away, Diana knew where her loyalties lay. Alexander, she shouted angrily as she pushed the guy away hard and rushed to Felix, helping him up. Alexander hit the ground with a thud as his head banged against the doorframe. Stars burst in his eyes from the pain. But of course, the woman who usually cared for him wasn't paying attention to him now. Instead, all her focus was on another man. Frustration boiled over inside Alexander. He couldn't help himself and moved to separate them. Let go. You let him go. This jerk is faking it. I didn't push him at all. The angrier Alexander got, the more helpless Felix appeared, hiding pitifully behind Diana. Diana, Felix said timidly, who exactly is this man to you? He suddenly claimed I was the third wheel and acted all aggressive. I've never been so wronged in my life. He sighed. I do admit I like you, but if he's really your boyfriend, I'll step away. Diana's heart skipped a beat. That phrase, I like you, pulled her in completely, as if some invisible hand was guiding her. There's nothing between him and me. Let me take you home first, she said. Alexander completely lost it. He screamed as he tried to rush at them, looking downright crazed. Diana, how can you be so heartless? If we have nothing, then who gave birth to Gloria? Tell me. Felix turned back, pretending to be magnanimous. Diana, your friend seems unwell. Maybe you should take him back first. I can call my sister to pick me up. His composure made Alexander look even more unreasonable. She helped Felix stand up, shooting Alexander a cold glare. I'll have security deal with him. Just ignore him, she said, leading Felix away without looking back. Alexander's cries faded into the distance as Diana carried on, Felix leaning comfortably against her shoulder with a slight curve to his lips. Now it was Alexander's turn to taste the bitter pill of suffering Felix had once swallowed. Once they got Felix home, Diana was filled with guilt. I wanted to treat you to dinner tonight and get to know you better, but things didn't go as planned. I'm so sorry. Felix smiled reassuringly. Don't worry, I don't feel wronged. It seems Diana is quite the popular one in a city, driving a man crazy for her. He got out of the car, waving her off with a smile. We had a bit of a rocky dinner tonight. Hopefully, next time will be smoother. Diana was surprised. He actually wanted to see her again, even after the scene Alexander had made. She hadn't expected him to be so forgiving. Her face lit up with joy. Okay, I promise. Next time will be perfect. After dropping Felix off, Diana headed back to the Grants, where she found Alexander waiting at home. Her expression grew increasingly annoyed as she approached him, her voice lacking the warmth it once held. What were you trying to do today? I never knew you could be so wild. Alexander sneered. I turned out like this because you pushed me. Remember your promises? He chuckled bitterly. But now, in front of your new guy, you say we have nothing? You're quite the actress. Diana laughed instead of getting angry. You're well aware of my acting skills, aren't you? That trick with Joshua was your idea, wasn't it? Looking at you today, you must have fallen on purpose back then, too. Alexander's face went pale. After a long silence, he couldn't help but speak. Diana, since Felix looks so much like Joshua, are you still hung up on Joshua? Diana shuddered slightly but refused to admit it. Her words filled with warning instead. No, Alexander, Grandma will never let us marry. If you behave yourself, considering you're Gloria's father, I won't mistreat you. But if you hassle Felix again, I won't let it slide. You'll be my secretary, just as before. I won't mistreat you. Understand? Leaving the Grants, Alexander's face was twisted with hatred. After waiting so long, thinking if he held out, he'd marry into the Grants, here came Felix to ruin it. With the green status, of course, the Grants would want to connect with them. He'd be left in the dust. He was desperate. He had to act now, make a scene, let everyone know Gloria was his daughter to have a fighting chance. An idea sparked in his mind. On the other side, Diana and Felix's relationship deepened quickly over several days. She even took Felix to the Grants to meet Grandma. Initially, she felt uneasy about him looking so much like Joshua. But once his identity was confirmed, and learning about his kindness and talent, she let her guard down. One day, Felix and his sister Kathy joined them for dinner at the Grants. They were enjoying themselves until Alexander's voice rang out from the yard. "Diana, are you going to abandon us, your family? You promised me once that with Joshua gone, I'd be your only husband. All these years, I've put up with so much and couldn't even have my own child with me, all so that one day you could introduce me to the Grants without any issues. Now you've found someone new and you're just done with me?" His outburst kept getting louder, downright jarring in this quiet, wealthy neighborhood. Clearly, the people inside dining heard the noise too. Kathy was the first to speak up. "Is what that man said true? If so, Felix, you absolutely cannot be with Diana. Even if I agreed, my parents overseas would never accept it." The Grants immediately tensed up, especially the grandmother, whose face looked awful. She tried to calm everyone down despite her anger. "It's not what you think. This man has been pestering Diana. I'll just have someone get rid of him." She started to get up to call someone, but Felix suddenly stood. "Wait a minute. Ever since Diana and I started seeing each other, Alexander has been causing trouble. I want to know what's really going on." He turned to Kathy. "Let's go ask him what's really happening." The two got up, and it was too late for Diana to stop them as they headed to the door. There, Alexander was approaching with Gloria step by step. Everyone's expressions went sour as they watched him prompt Gloria to greet everyone. Alexander nudged her back and asked, "Tell them, who am I?" Gloria, wide-eyed, still had tears on her cheeks. Where they couldn't see, there was a bruise on her neck. She was clearly scared as she replied, "Daddy, you're my daddy." After she spoke, Alexander smugly looked at Felix. "See? Everything I told you is true. Joshua's baby died at birth, so I had to place my child with him. Diana and I knew each other way before, so I'm not some side piece. But now that we have lingering feelings and you two are involved, I came today hoping the Grants could give me an explanation." Hearing this, Kathy was furious and turned to the Grants, her tone far less friendly than before. "In that case, please sort out your own family matters first. We can't afford to be involved with your family. From now on, please, Diana should stop bothering my brother." She then stormed off, dragging Felix with her. Diana wanted to chase after them, but Alexander grabbed her arm. Annoyed and angry, she couldn't outburst with the grandmother around. Once the car was far enough, Kathy playfully teased Felix. "Just like you predicted, Alexander couldn't hold it any longer. He's really pissed off the Grants, and he's gonna get what's coming to him." Felix's face remained calm as if he expected all this. "We'll just watch them tear each other apart. The Grants are ruthless. Now that they want to climb up to the Greens' level, they'll handle Alexander harshly to show their sincerity. Plus, Diana's tired of him by now. Using a child crossed a line with the Grants. They really thought we wanted to marry into their family without seeing what kind of people they are." Seeing him so sure, Kathy smiled with relief. "I was worried you'd be fooled by her again, but seeing you now, I know I didn't have to worry." Felix forced a bitter smile. After everything he went through, if he could fall for her lies again, then he'd really be a fool. Alexander's punishment was already in progress. Diana was next. News came of Alexander days later. Apparently, he fled with money, only to accidentally drive off a cliff while on the run. When they found him, he was barely alive, gripping a bank card tight. Looks like the Grants really went after him, wanting him silenced to keep Joshua's secrets and prevent his loose talk. Diana reached out to Felix a few days later. They met at a quiet bar, each with a drink, chatting. Took Diana a while to speak. "I'm sorry, Felix, for all the trouble and pain." Felix shook his head, his expression colder than ever. "You know that's not what I want to hear." Diana seemed to have so much to say but couldn't speak up in the end. "I promise nothing like this will happen again. Felix lost his patience, ready to leave. This time, Diana panicked, quickly stopping him. Please don't go, Felix. You know you're the only one in my heart. Felix sighed deeply. Diana, I'll give you one last chance. If you're honest with me now, I might consider our future. Remember, I hate lies. Tell me the whole truth. She slowly looked up, her eyes somewhat hazy. I made some mistakes. Felix stayed seated, seeing she was finally ready to talk. Tell me, your late husband and Alexander, what's their connection? And whose child is this anyway, Alexander's or your husband's? Diana clutched her head, obviously overwhelmed. She downed her drink, using the buzz for courage. Felix, I'll tell you everything. Just don't leave me, okay? Felix watched her misty eyes, nodding slightly. All right, go on. When she heard his promise, she finally let her guard down and told the whole story. I know I let Joshua down, so after he passed away, I truly regretted my actions and wanted to make things right. But fate didn't give me the chance, she said, shedding a tear without even realizing it. I never wanted Joshua dead. I was just blinded by everything. Turns out it wasn't just me acting. Alexander was putting on a show too, she continued. He acted all kind-hearted and patient in front of me, making me hold a grudge against Joshua. But in the end, I realized the one I truly wronged was Joshua. If I could turn back time, I'd treat him right. After hearing all of this, Felix felt nothing inside. Watching the woman cry her heart out, seemingly full of remorse, only made him feel disgusted. He suppressed his strong aversion and asked again, so, the child you gave birth to, did you really cause your own baby's death? Diana covered her eyes, afraid to look up. Yes, it was me. I must have been insane to harm my own child. Felix, you have no idea how much I regret it now. If I could do it over, I wouldn't make the same mistake. Felix coolly put his hand in his pocket, pressed stop on the recorder, then stood up indifferently. So, the one you've always had feelings for is your husband. You pursued me just because I resemble him, didn't you? Diana, I'm sorry, but I'm not a stand-in. I need a clean, pure love. Having said that, he turned to leave. Diana chased after him, almost begging as she grabbed his hand. It's not like that, Felix. I genuinely care for you. I feel guilty about Joshua, but with you, it's real love. You're different from Joshua, you have to believe me. From now on, I'll only have you in my heart. I'll treat you well and love you sincerely. He pulled his hand away from hers, still speaking with apathy. No need. I can't handle your love. We're not right for each other. You should find someone more fitting for you. And with that, he hurried away as if fleeing. Behind him, Diana, already feeling tipsy, chased after him carelessly. As he crossed the street, she blindly followed, not watching where she was going. Just then, a suddenly out-of-control car raced towards her. With a loud bang, Diana lay in a pool of her own blood. In her last moment of consciousness, she thought she saw Joshua's face flash before her eyes. But when she blinked hard, that familiar face vanished. She lay on the cold cement, her whole body feeling like it was falling apart from the pain. The noise of voices and car horns buzzed around her, discussing her pathetic state. She couldn't make out the words. All she knew was that her legs were numb with pain, cold so cold. She shivered uncontrollably, with no warmth to comfort her. So this is what it's like to be hit by a car. When she had the car run over Joshua, it must have been more hopeless for him. After all, he was crushed by the wheels 9 times. It seems karma has come full circle, and now the heavens are punishing her on his behalf. As emergency responders loaded her onto an ambulance, she heard the sirens again. She could faintly hear nurses talking about her. She tried to open her eyes, but her eyelids felt heavier than ever. Did you hear? Even if she survives, she's heading straight to the police. They say she killed her own newborn and an ex-lover too. What? Her? Is that Diana? How could she do that? She's always been a great actress. Just look at her exes. None had a good end. I always said those women who acted so loving were mostly bad news. But now, being hit by that car serves her right. Word is she chased after a new boyfriend, drunk and not watching the road, and got hit. I bet she'll lose those legs. Do you think her new guy will ditch her? Laughter followed as they discussed. Think about it. When the ambulance came, her boyfriend wasn't even there. I heard he gave the evidence leading to her arrest. Yeah, I also heard he looks just like her deceased husband. Maybe it was her husband's spirit in another body coming for revenge. The voices faded, and she couldn't hear them anymore. On the plane to France, Felix was comfortably dozing by the window. Kathy was about to cover him with a blanket when she caught his sleepy gaze. Awake? Did you sleep well? She asked. Felix stretched with a smile. I've never slept this soundly. Finally, getting revenge gives me peace. Kathy smiled back. I heard Diana's leg injuries are so bad, they'll have to amputate. She'll need a wheelchair for life. The driver who hit her is a notorious jerk. They'll struggle to get back at him. Plus, with your evidence, the police uncovered their tax evasion, fined them big time, and Diana got kicked off the board. Her comeback attempt seems unlikely. Felix, it's over and your hands are still clean. You're amazing. Felix's smile grew even brighter. Call me Joshua. From now on, I don't have to live under Felix's identity. Kathy nodded. Okay, Joshua. I thought you'd want Diana dead, but you called for an ambulance, saving her from bleeding out. His eyes lacked sympathy but were full of pride. Sometimes living is more painful than dying. She's always been proud. Now, without her legs and wealth, this is her worst punishment. Kathy nodded in agreement. At last, we can see the light after the storm. What's the first thing you want to do when we get back to France? He gazed at the blue sky above the clouds, took a deep breath, and laughed. The world is vast. I'll think about what I want to do later. When we land, I'll sleep well first. Kathy glanced at him sideways. If I say I want to invite you to dinner, would you be interested? He chuckled, pulling the blanket over himself, snuggling back into his seat. We'll see once we land and I've woken up. Kathy laughed along, settling next to him. The sun shone brightly outside the window. Sunny days were ahead, and his new life was just beginning.